Assalamu alaikum, dear listeners. From the platform of Kashana-e-Baseerat, I'm reading to you the book Fatima is Fatima by Dr. Ali Shariyati. We begin with chapter 8, which begins with the title of a question: which mold do they fill? Subtitle: Traditional or Absurd. In reality, in our society, those who ask, who am I, what should I be, or what is my identity, are of two types. One type is a person who is attached to outdated, existing traditions that are called religion and ethics, which that person wants to impose upon others. He can't. Even though he knows he can't, he still sticks with them. He still retains them. He tries to impose them upon the young people. There's another type who is afraid to act even under the pseudonym of intellectual, modern, or freedom seeker, because he thinks, if I interfere, or if I negate or agree or control the ifs, I'll be condemned as being old-fashioned, Eastern, backward, and religious. So against the social changes in the types of young men and women, he plays the role of a dead person. In other words, his child acts while the mother and father create possibilities for him. They are called intellectual parents, but their silence and surrender does not stem from their intellectual abilities. It does not come from their beliefs, but rather from their impotency and weakness. He says to himself, if I interfere, I will give up my outer external strength and my inner emptiness will show. Prestige, Papa. These are two types of people who can be molded. One is attached to the traditions of the Chahar Bagh of Isfahan, huge, ugly, crooked, and decayed. The second is a product of European brick kilns, straight, subtle, without endurance, hollow and absurd. These are the two types and two ways. Both are incorrect and lost. Why? One stands against the roaring flood of realities which is about to ruin everything. He tries to turn back the waters with his hands. He tries to stop the flow. He swears, cries out, laments, sobs, and cries at the flood which builds up and flows out and takes everything in its way. The other one stretches himself out next to the flood waters like a dead person, like a useless observer. This dear man, who has no personality of his own, is quiet, works from morning until night, commits murder, rips people off, is a pickpocket, performs 1,000 dirty deeds, praises, tricks people, and then fills his pockets in order to have them emptied by foreign companies and to have himself poured into their pockets. Women, we cannot know, is the next topic, and it begins with the following discussions. There are only some European women who have the right to recognize. It is they whom we always have to refer to. They are the women introduced through films and magazines, television, and sexy movies by writers who have given them sex. They are introduced to us as a universal type of European people. We have no right to get to know the European girl who is at the age of 16, went to the deserts of Nubia, Africa, the deserts of Algeria and Australia. She spent all of her life in the wild places. She lived with the threat of sickness, death, and wild tribes. Throughout her youth and old age, she studied the waves emitted from the antenna of ants and antennas which receives them. When she grew old, her daughter carried on her work. The second generation of this European woman returned to France at the age of 50. At the university, she said, I discovered the language of the ants and learned some of their signs of communication. We have no right to come to know Madame Gauchin who spends her whole life studying and finding the roots of philosophical ideas and the wisdom of Avicenna. Ibn Rushd, Mullah Sadra, and Haji Mullah Hadi Sabzwari in Greek philosophy, and many of the words of Aristotle, and then compared them. She showed what her philosophers received from them. She corrected what she had badly translated and incorrectly understood for the 1,000 years of Islamic civilization. We have no right to know the Italian Madame della Vita. In one of her works, she was to edit and complete the Science of the Soul of Avicenna from the ancient Greek manuscript of Aristotle on the soul. We have no right to know Madame Curie, who discovered quantum and radioactivity, or Risas de la Chapelle, who knew more about the sanctity of Ali than all the Islamic scientists and even all the Shiites who claim today to be aware of Ali and Alavis. She was a young, beautiful, free Swedish girl born far from Islamic culture. She was distant from Shiite behavior and beliefs. From the beginning of her youth, she devoted her life to knowing that spirit which has remained unknown in the structure of Islam. She followed a man who'd been covered over by the hatred of his enemies and caught in traps laid by hypocrites and embellished by poetic phrases and meaningless friends. She discovered the most correct manuscripts about Ali. She came to know the most subtle waves of his spirit, the depth of his feelings, and his highest beliefs in ideas. For the first time, she felt his anger, pain, loneliness, brokenness, fear, and needs. Not only did she show Ali in the battles of Uhud, Badr, and Hunain, but she also found Ali praying in the mihrab of the mosque in Kufa. She discovered his nights and his complaining around the wells of Medina. She gathered together the Nahjul Balagha, which the Arab Muslims have access to through the literary edition of Muhammad S.A.W., the great Sunni Mufti, whereas the Shiites have the lecture of Jawad Fazl, which is related to Ali, or the Faiz translation, which is correct but has to be read with the help of the Arabic text. This girl, a disbeliever destined for hell, who gathered all of the writings of Ali in this and that book, notebook, or recorded in a manuscript hidden here and there. She read all of them and translated them and interpreted them. The most beautiful and deepest writings ever written about someone flowed from her pen. From 42 years, she has continued to study, think, work, and research Ali. We have no right to know Angela, the American girl in prison, who is not only the hope of two countries, but of all the free people of the world, of all the wounded, all those condemned through humanity's racial discrimination, that is, the oppressed. We should not know that foreign women who are not just toys of Don Juans, who take money, unattractive things, and jewels, female slaves, serving men as long as they want them, as long as they are interested. We should not believe that they are the only worthy of the attention of their pleasures, desires, and lusts. After that period, they are like machines that have become outdated. Rather, the foreign women have progressed to the point of becoming the embodiment of an ideology of a country and the place of salvation, pride, and the honor of a generation. But we have no right to know them. We only have the right to know Madame Twiggy. And at the first level of the ideal manifestation of Western civilization, the Quran of 71, and along with her, the highest form of European woman, Jacqueline Onassis, who uses her money as a means of exchange for everything. Bibi and the Queen of Monaco and all of the 7 female guards around James Bond. They are the sacrifices of the departments of the production of Europe. They are the toys and wind-up dolls of the wealthy and the slaves of the new civilization for the houses of the new merchants. We Iranians only have the right to know them to be examples of women of European civilization. I have never seen photographs from Cambridge, the Sorbonne, the Harvard University showing and telling about female university students who go to the library and work on the 14th and 15th century manuscripts and artifacts from 2,500 to 3,000 years ago in China, or who bend over Quranic manuscripts based upon Latin, Greek, cuneiform, and Sanskrit text without moving and without allowing their eyes to rove. They don't take their heads out of their books until the librarian takes their books away or asks them to leave. You men and women, seekers of knowledge, scholars, researchers, have you ever heard of the famous contemporary German scholar Frau Honecker? Have you heard that she has recently written a very comprehensive study of Islam and its influence about European civilization, which has been translated into Arabic and is entitled The Arab Sun Spreads Over the West? These are not today's women, and they should not be known. Why? Because one group is the old-fashioned, they are the tradition seekers, the other is superstition and hidden and at the same time known and apparent. If they join hands, they will awaken us. They will destroy everything we have. So people are obliged to take the form of tamed consumers and quiet slaves. These are too old-fashioned, traditional, and newly wealthy for all practical purposes. Work together so that a new type comes into being, one under the name of ethics and religion, and the other under the name of freedom and progress. The old-fashioned worshippers of tradition hit women with prejudicial fanaticism and push her, leaving her without bread and water. They show her anger. They have no compassion. They treat her so badly that the woman, half crazy with her eyes and ears closed, throws herself into the skirts of those whose cylindrical hats and goat-like beards, who become her, take off their hats respectfully and with correct manners, bend their heads forward politely with a smile upon their faces, treat her gently. This very European woman of whom we have come to know is a woman of today. She delivered herself, but she is the progeny of the Middle Ages. She is reacting to the inhuman treatment and fanaticism of the priests of the Middle Ages, who, in the name of Christianity and religion, misguided women and cursed and enslaved them. They even showed her to be hated by God. They were the activators of corruption. She was the main cause of Adam's fall from paradise to the earth. In the Middle Ages, they asked the priest, if there is a woman in the house, should a man who is not related enter? They said never. Because if a man is not related and he enters the house where there is a woman, even if he does not see the woman, still he has sinned. In other words, if an unrelated man goes to the second floor of the house and a woman is in the basement, sin occurs. It seems that the sins of women spread through the air. St. Thomas D'Aquin said, if God should see the love for a woman upon a man's face, even if the woman is his wife, he becomes angry because no love other than the love of God should sit upon his heart. Christ loved without a wife. A man can be a Christian, never having touched a woman. This is why Christian brothers and spiritual fathers and even Christian sisters never marry, because marriage is a tie which arouses God's anger. We should only join with God through Jesus Christ, because two loves do not fit into one heart. Only those who remain unmarried can carry the Holy Ghost. In Christianity, The first sin was the sin of woman. Every man as a child of Adam who turns towards a woman, even if that woman be his wife, and Eve was the wife of Adam, repeats the first primordial sin. The sin and disobedience of Adam is renewed in the memory of God. Thus, one must do something so that God will forget Adam and his sin. This is why a woman in the thoughts of the people of the Middle Ages is so hated, weakened, and held back from the ownership of anything. If it extended to the point that when a woman owning property went to her husband's house, she lost the rights of her property. Her ownership was itself transferred to her husband. A woman had no legal status. The effects of this can still be found in European civilization, which is completely unacceptable to us. Even today, if a woman marries, she changes her name. This is not just for use in her home or officially. Her education certificates, her identification, her passport, everything is replaced from carrying her father's name to her husband's name. This means that a woman herself is nothing. She has no essential existence. A name is significant. A creature who lacks significance stands to others. In her parents' home, she uses her father's name. She lives with her first owner. When she goes to her husband's home, the name of another man, her new owner, distinguishes her. She does not possess sufficient value or credit to have a name. This tradition has also influenced Iran because it is a European tradition. Their traditions are better than ours, even if it is a tradition from the slave age, even if it is nonsense, a detested and ugly action. The very fact that it has a foreign mark upon it is sufficient for our modernists, characterized by their impotent imitation. By imitation, whether a modernist or a traditionalist reflection in choosing. There is no questioning or judgment about good or bad, no distinction between the useful and the useless. The basis of their imitation is the principle that whatever defend the king accepts is art. They confirm him until it reaches the point where if he says day is night, they add, yes, I see the moon and stars. In the official European marriage forms, the two people to be married are asked name, secondly, girl's family name, and answering the first question, her family name, which will be taken after marriage, that is, the family name of the husband-to-be, is recorded. In answer to the second question, her unmarried family name, the name of her father, is recorded. In other words, a woman belongs to the owner of the house. If a house had originally belonged to her, she could not continue to own it because she is a woman. In her father's house, it was the name, and in her husband's house, it is his name which is used. This is why she officially changes her name through marriage. Our modernists have recently become aware of this foreign tradition. She also changes her first name after marriage. She does not change her family name, but rather her first name. This is ridiculous. This is just an example which our pseudo-foreigners take from the foreign, better race. Whatever that race does, it's copied without even knowing its reason, purpose, or value, because our modernists have no common sense. This idiot ridiculously, unconsciously acts and thinks like a foreigner because he or she cannot distinguish. This is why we say pseudo-foreigners have been born into a modern society who do not resemble foreigners, and pseudo-Europeans have come into existence for which no example in Europe exists. According to the present divorce law in France, when a woman separates from her husband, she has absolutely no rights to her children. Where in Islam, from the very beginning, the purest form of Islam, not the present composite form of Islam, she is completely independent in respect to women's rights. She can even seek payment from her husband for nursing her child. She can carry on her own business without any interference from her husband. She can work as a production. She can independently and directly put her capital into effect. She has the most economic independence of any member of society. All the anti-human and pseudo-religious pressures committed against women in the name of religion have caused a reaction amongst European women. This reaction by women is directed against the Middle Ages. The memory and thought of it has remained with her. In Italy and Spain, where religion is still strong, women are denied many of their human rights in spite of the signs of freedom and emphasis upon human rights and other such grand jokes. We are talking about human freedom and social rights, not sexual freedom and sexual rights. We see with what speed the latter becomes prevalent. In return for the second worlds, the previous third world, oil, diamonds, rubber, gum, copper, coffee, and uranium, which inexpensively enters Europe. Europe exports freedom, ethics, techniques, culture, art, literature, and in particular sex to this hungry, plundered world freely and with generosity. All means of communication and advertisement, social, technical, artistic, and educational possibilities of an underdeveloped country come into the service of propaganda, promotion, and distribution. These things are all other than freedoms and the rights of man. Sexual freedoms are deceiving. It's a part of the new exploitation, a type of limitless deception, which the impure system of Western capitalism in today's world causes both the East and West innocently of just to reach outwards until it gets to the point that the influence of Western people and the influenced Eastern countries find a secure and safe environment for themselves and find continuity. The younger generation in particular, those who contain both the elements of rebellion and audacity, and those who lack patience as well as those who are not stupefied by religious stipulations and have released the hereditary chains of traditions which crimp their thoughts because they find they do not relate to their sensitivities. At any moment, it is possible that based upon rebellion, they take up a notion contrary to their interests and as a result put their heads into an inexpensive foreign lover's cesspool and become so drowned and giddy in the artificial freedom as presented by capitalists that they no longer know what the world is about. They so completely saturate themselves with it that they no longer sense their poverty and slavery. This is why we see to what extent the internal conditions of despotism in Asia, Africa, and Latin America result in an insane-like emphasis, seriousness, and insistence upon the rights and freedom of sex by the Western capitalists. It is emphasized and strengthened so that the groundwork is laid for its daily increase. We can, with a little bit of caution and discernment, come to know what is behind these attractive forms of the thunderstruck sexuality, which is none other than the denial of the modern world. We have to come to know these great idols and the three faces of the contemporary religious trinity: exploitation, colonialization, and despotism. They make Freud a prophet of lies. From Freudism, they build a scientific human religion. From sexuality and ethical conscience, a real institution. Finally, from lust, a blessed temple is built. They built this place of worship and create a powerful servanthood. The first sacrifice recording in the threshold of this temple is woman. Ladies and gentlemen, we stop here at page 72 of chapter number 8, and we will begin with our next sitting with the subtitle of the same chapter, and which the title is Who is the Contemporary Woman? Serving Oneself versus Serving Others. Goodbye until then. Khuda Hafiz, and we will meet soon from the platform of Kashana-e-Baseerat again. Khuda Hafiz.